Hello and welcome back. I hope you're doing well. I have a bunch of gouache tubes here because by request I'm going to be making swatch cards on cotton paper of my gouache collection. So all the tubes that you see here is my complete gouache collection, and I've shown on the channel before that I've made swatch cards for my whole watercolour collection. And as you can see, I have way more watercolours than I do gouache. But today, because I've never made swatch cards for my gouache before, I'm going to be making those. So we have here a bunch of little swatch cards I've made. These are all Saunders Waterford cotton watercolour paper, and it's the 300 GSM cold press. And what I've done, similar to my watercolour ones, is I've put a black line at the top here, and that helps me test the opacity, because even though gouache is opaque, you will find that some are more opaque than others. So you see there that the circle's filled in versus a half-filled circle, so this is more transparent than this. So we get to test out a little bit the opacity by doing that. I just did it with Posca this time. Sometimes I'll do it with just black ink, but this time I did it with Posca, and I made all of them roughly the same size from scrap bits of paper that I've cut off sheets that I have. We have a somewhat clean palette here, and then I've got a big jar of water. So let's get started. As you can probably tell, this is going to be a longer, more relaxed, real-time video this time around. I may have to occasionally change out the water, even though I've got a big jar. I may have to change out the water occasionally because gouache is more opaque, it's going to get dirty very quickly. So I don't want to use too much paint, so I'm just going to be very careful with how much I get out. That'll maybe be enough, but if it isn't, I can get more. And because I am kind of just stepping into gouache bit by bit, I don't have too many brushes dedicated to gouache. I just have a few, and they're not super high quality or anything. I don't use my really nice watercolour brushes on them just because it can ruin really nice watercolour brushes, can gouache. So we're just going to be using, I've got a couple options here. I'm probably just going to stick with the dagger, but we'll see how it goes. We shall see. I have a feeling I might need more of the yellow than this. You know what, let's just take it off like that. So the yellow is on the more transparent end, as you can probably see from me mixing it. It is semi-transparent on the back, and this is Primary Yellow by Winsor & Newton, which is PY74 and PY138. So I'm going to start with it more opaque up here. So I've dampened the brush, but I've not added any water to the gouache that's in here. And as you can see, it's got opacity to it, but it's not so opaque that it's covering the black line by any means whatsoever. So now we're going to add a bit more water. So this is one of the first colours I got when I started using gouache, I saved up and dove right into buying Winsor & Newton designer's gouache rather than trying out a set of cheaper gouache. I did actually start first of all with some Winsor & Newton and some Daler Rowney, but I didn't really like the Daler Rowney that I used. But those ones that I got from Daler Rowney were on sale, so I don't know if they were just getting a little bit old. But yep, this is the primary yellow, so we'll set this aside to dry. I've got my easel free, my table easel free next to me off that way. So I'm going to pop them over there. And we're done with this one now, so you can go over there now. So I started off with a yellow, an orange, and a cool red. Or you could say a warm red and a cool red and one yellow. Two blues, a warm and a relatively cool, a purple, and a green, and then white and black. I can't remember which colours I got from Daler Rowney because I think I only picked up a couple colours that were on sale just to sort of see what gouache was like in terms of its consistency. So this is a fully opaque orange. We'll see if that's enough. Like I said, I don't want to waste too much paint doing this. That's why the swatch cards are also quite small as well. So this is Orange Lake Deep, and that is PY65 and PR9. Light fastness 2. What was the light fastness on the yellow? Light fastness nothing? It doesn't have a light fastness. Okay then. Yeah, doesn't have a light fastness. Interesting. Interesting. So dampen the brush. Need to also make sure that there's definitely no yellow. Because one thing that I have definitely noticed using gouache is that it's a little bit more like using acrylic and oil. You have to make sure you really get the pigment out of the brush, because the pigment will stick around if it wants to. So we want to dampen the brush so we don't have too much water. You can already see that's acting a lot more opaque. I might need a little bit more pigment. Yeah. I might grab a little bit more from the tube. So some of you who've been sticking around the channel for a while will probably notice that I keep, let's do this actually, I keep a cloth on my desk. And it's not actually for aesthetic purposes. It's to remind myself that this is a painting surface, as in there are materials here that do not want to be near, say, like food or something, because this is my desk that I'm at and I use it for multiple purposes, not just art. So I need to remind myself that when the cloth is down, only art supplies are supposed to be down. So there you go, that's the secret as to why I have a cloth as my background on my desk. And occasionally I change up the cloth because either just because I want to, or because I want to change it for the seasons, because it starts to get dirty and I need to clean it. As you can see, this is an orange, but it acts quite well as a warm red, especially in its mass tone. When I'm trying to buy less paints, like when I was originally getting these Winsor & Newton ones, sometimes I will just buy a yellow, a very red orange, and then like a magenta, rather than getting the traditional split primary of 2 yellows, 2 reds. And I found that it works out for me to do that. Ideally, I'd want a split primary, but we'll leave that to dry now. But I don't mind too much. Make space. So next up, we have, speaking of split primary, we're on to the magenta here, which is Permanent Rose. So not actually magenta. So good old PV19. PV19 is pretty much my staple in any in any medium, any traditional medium anyway. I use PV19 as my cool red in watercolour. So it made sense that when I was, you know what, I need to just do this. So it made sense that when I was getting into gouache that I be relatively familiar with the colours that I was getting already, so that it eases me into a different medium. I'm not struggling massively with the colours. It's very bubbly, this one. But because this is PV19, which is very, very transparent in watercolour, it's going to be more transparent in gouache, even though it has a fully opaque symbol on it. I have found that it is slightly more on the transparent side. Let's grab another card. So again, this is just straight paint. With it being winter here, the lighting is a little bit funky, so once all of these swatch cards are dry, I'll get them set up in some nice lighting so you can see what they look like at the end. And I definitely need more paint on this one. I'm not too fussed about making a super smooth gradient or anything with this. I just want to see what it looks like opaque, and then kind of like when I use the when I do the watercolor ones, once these are dry, I'm going to put a stripe down here of a glaze so we can see how the opacity is with a second layer as well. But as you can see, for it saying that it's a fully transparent color, I'm a little bit suspicious. I am a little bit suspicious of that. When I'm using gouache, I do tend to prefer using flat and dagger brushes. I don't know why, but I do. Again, there we go. You can go off to dry over here somewhere now. I am glad that the first signs of spring are starting to appear here now. I love all of the seasons, but in recent years, winter's just been grey here. There's not really the, like for the last week, all we've had is clouds every single day. Today is the first day we actually have sunlight during the day, which is one reason why I'm filming today. I've kind of been waiting and hoping that we'd get some sun so that I have some natural light. I have a cup of tea off to the side. So next, I already have a paint casualty. Next up we have purples. So I have Windsor Violet, which is deoxazine violet here. Good old PV23. Again, it says that it is fully opaque. I can already see that my water is getting murky, so probably after the blues I'll change the water. Probably, if I remember. Dampen the brush a bit. Got big globule paint. I did make that a little bit too watery, so what I'll do is grab some off the tube. Like in watercolour, deoxazine violet's a very punchy colour. There you go. That's what it's like straight from the tube. I do find it, especially in gouache, really, really nice for value studies when I don't want to do the typical black. Though I must say that in watercolour, my favourite value study colour is M. Graham's neutral tint. Again, there we go. I'm running out of space. We should get a nice pretty rainbow on this palette by the end of it though. Well, not quite a rainbow, but going around the colour wheel in the way that I like to go around the colour wheel. When I first started learning about painting, I can't remember what sources I was learning from exactly, but I ended up learning from the whole starting with yellow, then oranges, reds, purples, blues, greens, and then your earth tones, and that's just how I naturally deal with paint now. So we've done purple. Let's move some of these out the way. So now we've got the good old ultramarine blue, which is PV29, and again it says that it is opaque, so ultramarine blue. There is a little bit of white on the top of this, so I'm just going to clean that away. And pick out some paint. There we go. Dampen the brush a bit because it's a bit dry. But let's not go as wet as I did with the dioxazine. we go, that's right. A bit more. It's a bit too gummy. It's quite gummy, this one, actually. Needs a bit of water. Needs a lot of water. Very gummy. Even though it's even more watered down now, you can kind of see that it is definitely more opaque than some of the previous ones. I'm just going to plonk more. Paint down. You can see how much more opaque that is in comparison to the PB19. And if you can't, then at the end it'll be easier to see. So, a bit more water. And a bit more water. There we go. So, ultramarine. Now for the cool blue, at the time when I picked these out, which is quite a while ago now actually, I didn't pick out a phthalo for some reason. Nowadays, if I'd been buying these as I am now, I would have bought a phthalo blue, green shade, as my cool blue. But when I was buying these, I bought Prussian blue. Not really what you'd consider a classic cool blue, but there we go. So PB27, and again it's classed as fully opaque, or opaque. And that got a load of dust on the palette, so there we go. Let's use the brush. Oh, that was a lot of paint. Oopsie. Oopsie. When I first got into watercolour and gouache too, but when I first got into watercolour, because it started with watercolour, I had a deep, deep love of Prussian blue. And then I got afraid of it because of, some of you may remember a while back now, there was a whole freak out, I guess you could say, not really a freak out, but people realized that it's not technically light fast. It has this weird, can't remember exactly how it works off the top of my head, but I believe that in sunlight it turns green over time or something, but then if you put it in the dark, it turns back to its original colour again. So it's like a weird, not really light fastness issue, but like a weird colour changing issue. So a lot of people moved away from it and kind of, not demonized it, but I mean, even I did, I moved away from it. It's still on some of my really old palettes in watercolour. But nowadays, my sort of love for the deep, slightly muted blue comes, and you can see how deep this is, comes in the form of Indanthrone now. I get my deep blue satisfaction from Indanthrone. But I do still love Prussian blue. And really, there's nothing really stopping me from painting with it. But I am gonna probably grab a traditional cool blue. At some point, your phthalo blue, something like that, to actually have the cool blue. I'm kind of rambling a little bit because multitasking is not working out for me too much at the moment. Now let's see. I almost forgot. I will be right back because I'm going to clean out this water. Okay, there we go. Fresh water obtained. And we can move this aside now. While I was changing out the water and cleaning my hands only for them to get messy again soon, I had the idea of, instead of doing the stripe of down the side of the same pigment like this that I do with watercolour, what I might do is, for this stripe, I might mix the colour with white and then do that mix down the side, maybe? We'll see what I feel like by the time these are dry. They're already drying at the moment, but we've still got some to go. And I'm going to have to clean space in the middle for the rest of these. So, next is green. Let's organise these. So we've got green, and then I want to do this one, and then these two. So we've got green. For green, I did go with a more traditional choice. This is Windsor Green, which is just phthalo green, blue shade. It's PG7. Again, it's classed as opaque, not semi-opaque, but opaque. It is making an interesting noise. Oh, we've got some bubbling. We've got some bubbling. Put that down a bit more. It's wiggling around. I can't get it back on. There we go. Ah. Damp the brush. Wiggle it around. Look at that opacity. Oh, some of the paint actually went on there. We'll just cover that up. It never happened. It never happened. I do actually have a weird thing going on with my white that I have from Winsor & Newton, the big tube of white. If anyone else out there uses Winsor & Newton permanent white in gouache, does your paint in the tube smell really, really minty for any reason? Because the paint from my tube does. It's a very, very strong, like, mint, I want to say, kind of scent. There we go with the phthalo green. Again, I'll try and get better lighting and colour correcting on that once it's dry. And speaking of drying, I need room for it to dry. There we go. Like, let me open it. Yeah, it has like this. It smells like mint and cloves, and I could understand cloves because people use clove oil in gouache as like an antifungal thing. So I guess maybe they use mint as well, but why can I only smell it in this? I can only smell it in this tube and it is really, really, really strong. I don't smell it in any of the others, but anyway, that's a random aside. Next we have yellow ochre, which is classed as fully opaque, and this is a mixture yellow ochre. This is PY42 and PY43. You'll have seen it in one of my recent swatching videos, but we're gonna swatch it again, but this time on cotton paper. Multitasking, yay! Probably enough because out of all of the colours I've swatched so far, this is going to be opaque in capital letters. Opaque in capital letters. I need to make sure that this brush is really, really clean because phthalo colours are super intense, so and we're about to go into a much less intense colour, so there we go. Get a little bit more water because we want like a buttery consistency. It's a bit too much water. There we go. Might need a bit more paint. I thought that I got quite a bit of paint out, but I don't think I did. It's a bit dry. Get some more paint. Doop. You may be able to hear that dog barking. If you can, I apologise. I do not have the powers to control the animals in nature. It'd be cool if I did, but alas, I do not. So you can see how opaque this is. You can also see how opaque it is by how quickly it clouded the water. Really, really clean this. Give it a good clean. I love using these really big glass jars for... These ones are actually kiln jars. I've got one that I use for watercolour and water-based media, and then I've got one that I use for oil painting, but it's the water mixable oils. Even though they're water mixable oils, I prefer having them in a different jar to this. There we go. That looks and feels clean. Have a sip of my tea. Now we are on to the brown, and I kind of want to clean off. I'll do it after this. I'll clean off the center after I've done this one. So this is Azuki or russet brown. It's classed as semi-opaque, and it is PR 101. The light fastness is a little bit easier to find, I guess. when I was swatching this, I thought that this was a really, really pretty brown, so I'm super happy that I picked this up. I just realized I have green all over me. But yeah, I am very happy I picked up this brown. We don't want too much water because we don't want a repeat of last time. Give it the opacity it deserves. Because although it is rated as semi-opaque, as you can see, it has a fair amount of opacity to it. That's my red brown. I do love using red browns, even in watercolour. Red, brown, brown, red, whichever way around it is one of the watercolours on my palette, on my Studio Travel Hybrid palette. This one. So now we have black and white. Let's see if I can actually get it on here as is without me having. This one's very bubbly. Pop you down there. Some of the black out. So for my black, I have Lamp Black, which is PBK7, and it is classed as fully opaque. If you want to get into painting and you specifically want to start with gouache and you don't want to get the really cheap sort of starter sets, you could start out with just a black and a tube of white. If you can, I would get a larger tube of the white and then do value study paintings at least to start with, and then you can always build up to larger and larger palettes, especially if you want to get into, say, portraiture. There's the Zorn palette, so you could start out with, you wouldn't use lamp black, you would use, sorry, I need to clear my throat. You would use ivory black in the Zorn palette because it's more blue leaning, whereas this is warmer leaning, as you'll kind of see from me watering it down. But you'd start with white and a blue leaning black, and then when you're ready to expand from doing value studies, you can get yellow ochre and I think it's cadmium red, or you can go for a non-cadmium alternative if that's more up your alley. And then you've got 4 colours to do portraiture. That's not how I went about starting with gouache, but we all have different needs and preferences, so that is a potential way to get into gouache, especially if you like portraiture. Another way is more like the way I did, where you choose split primaries. But with gouache, you, at the very least, you need white on top of your split primaries. And I do find black very useful in gouache from the times that I have used gouache. Although I've had these tubes for years now, I kind of go through phases of using gouache because I end up being focused on other things in my art time, in my art studying, in my art practice, and what I want to use. But, you know, I probably should have started with the white, but oh well. I'm gonna have to make sure that this is very, 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 very clean. But gouache is kind of like my taking a break from watercolour paint. So is oil. They're both almost, I want to say, like hobby paints for me. I need to just, you see there's a lot of gum arabic. I'm just going to go wipe that away. And some tissue. I'm just doing this until I see solid paint. There we go. And we just have enough space to put it down, but I am going to just grab a big pile and put it on there. But plus I think when you're starting out in art, you kind of, it's not even when you're just starting out, it can kind of happen in phases too, but you, look how that's just covering the black. You experiment around, right? You also get influenced by the artists you follow. You see that one of the artists you follow uses acrylic gouache, so you pick up some acrylic gouache to try out and figure out if it's something you like or you don't like. You see one of the artists you follow uses ink, so you try out ink. You see that another artist uses ink, but they use brush pens, so you try out brush pens. And if you're not careful, it's like a double-edged sword. It's really, really good to experiment, as long as it's to find out what you enjoy using and not because you're chasing after someone else's preferences when they're not your own. And that can be a very difficult lesson for some people to come to in their journey with art. There we go. Look at the white go in the water. Oh, it's so pretty. Okay, so I am going to let these dry really, really well. I will change out the water again, and then we will come back to do the final layer on them all. It has been a few hours and these are dry now. And I've decided that I am going to do the white gouache stripe over the top, or mixing them with white. And I'm just going to use each of these little sections. And that way I can try to take advantage of the paint that's already there as well. Obviously I'm reactivating the paint that's in here. As well. So we get a light lemony cream colour. But when fluff, there's a bit of fluff. There we go. But when put next to the yellow, it actually comes out looking quite white. Color theory, woo! And we're gonna water that down a touch more. And put that off to the side. Give this a good clean. I'm still going to have white left over in the brush. I found white is the hardest thing by far to get out of my brushes when doing gouache. So, oh well. We've got a cat hair there, if I can get it out. Cat hair. There we go. So permanent white is PW6. I need a little bit more water just to reactivate this. So we get a kind of peachy kind of colour here. Get the orange one. Yep, it's like a peachy orange. This is actually one of the ways that I combine gouache and watercolour quite easily, and it's another way that you can easily get into gouache is pretend that these are watercolours for a moment, and you buy just a tube of white, and then you can mix the white into your watercolours that you already have, and that way you can use at least the tints like gouache. But if you do that, I recommend that you have a dedicated palette space so dedicated like wells or what do you call them, pans that you use for mixing with the white gouache, because you will inevitably get some cross-contamination unless you're really careful. And then when you go to paint them in pure watercolour, you don't want the opacity from this showing through, so something to bear in mind. There we go. And lots of cat hairs going on today. That's almost an exact match. So we're doing, I might add a little bit more of some colours to the wells, like I might add more ultramarine blue, but we'll see how it goes. We shall see how it goes. So how has your art been going lately? That's reactivating underneath. Need to be a bit careful. How has your art been going recently in your art practice? Do you have any new sketchbooks? See how that's reactivating a little underneath? Need to be a bit thicker than I have been. See if I can grab more white. Have you got any new art supplies? Have you been up to anything new in your art studies, if you study at all? What paintings have you been doing recently? I have been starting, or I have started a bunch of watercolour and ink illustrations, and also just some ink illustrations as well. Some of which you'll see on here probably. If you have any questions or topic ideas that you want me to cover while I'm doing process videos of any of my illustrations, leave them in the comments and I will make note of them. What's that? Just don't want to contaminate the tube. I know at the moment, as I'm filming this, it's February. So there's the Funguary art challenge going. Jeez, that's so opaque, look. So there's Funguary going at the moment. And I don't want to mess around with this too much because it's going to start reactivating the paint underneath. You've got like a lilac, very pale lilac there. I'm probably going to add some ultramarine to this. I am most definitely going to add some ultramarine to this. Where did I put the ultramarine? I am also getting nice and messy again. Here is the ultramarine. Don't want too much. Ooh, I can really smell the white, that mint and cloves smell. So you can see how opaque the ultramarine is now it's dry. Trying to balance making the white paint thick enough that it doesn't disturb the layer below, but thin enough that it actually covers the area without spots. I might redo the purple, we'll see. We shall see. But I've tried to film today because, like I said, we've had a week of just non-stop grey, and then the weather forecast for the next 5 days, it's more clouds and no sun. For even an hour of the day, there's nothing. It's just clouds all day. So, actually, I'll just nick. I'm just going to steal that. Okay. It has been warming up a little bit here though. Obviously, if you're in the southern hemisphere, you'll be enjoying, or not enjoying, depending on how well you tolerate the heat. You'll have been enjoying hot weather. So that's the opacity on the Prussian blue. Seem to be getting more success doing it this way, so this way we shall go. Really making sure I'm getting plenty of the white out of this brush. I'm just pressing it against the rim of the glass. There we go. Yeah, that's better. I'm gonna have to give this a really good scrub after. I've got the brush soap, the painter's brush soap that I use for, pop that on there as well while I'm at it, that I use for cleaning my watercolour brushes. I have a separate soap for oil, and then so I've got a soap for oil, and then I've got a soap for watercolour and gouache brushes. Because I don't really like mixing oil. I've got traditional oil and then water mixable. For water mixable, I've just got black and white, so that I can do value studies in water mixable. I'm not too worried about the white being in it necessarily, it's just when it's the coloured white that I don't want to mix, especially going from green to yellow. That would be interesting. But really not watered down, but when you mix white with this, it ends up being a much warmer yellow in comparison to the primary. Dulled down, yes, but can stand in for a warmer cream. The bubble, get rid of that bubble. There we go. Where did I put you down to dry? I put you there to dry. We're making it work. We are making it work. Since this is a longer video, have you been doing any drawing while you've been watching? I really need to clean this lid, so I'm just going to clean the lid for a moment. If you have been doing any drawing, ooh, let's not knock the camera. There we go. If you have been doing any drawing and you want to post it on social media, tag me so I can see what you've done. There we go. So what are we up to now? We're up to the two more. We've got the brown and the black to go. And I'm going to put fresh paint down for at least that. That might be enough black for the white because the black is very... You do not need much black for a white to turn grey. And you don't need much white for black to turn grey. There we go. Grab the brown. This is why I wear an apron whenever I'm painting and anything opaque. That's actually a lot of paint. I don't want that much paint. Save me paint. There we go. Squeeze it back in. Ooh, that's pretty. It reminds me of if anyone plays Final Fantasy 14. I think it's Mole Brown, it's called, the dye, Mole Brown. I think that's the one I'm thinking of. Definitely reminds me of a dye in Final Fantasy 14 anyway. A little bit too thick. It's not going down too well. Even that's a little bit too thick. There we go. That's better. Yes, that's better. There we go. Again, I'll wait until these dry and then I'll get some good lighting. I'll wait until there's good lighting. I'll try and set up some good lighting so that you can see what they look like. We're rapidly running out of natural light in the day right now, so I can maybe see what I can salvage from tomorrow, even though it says it's going to be cloudy. Some light is better than no light, I guess. Something like that. Something like that. Alright, let's see what this ends up looking like. It's come out pretty grey. Could maybe add a little bit more. Did I leave it there? No. Black. Black. And black. I'm going to have to move that off to the side because I don't want it to get contaminated. we have black. You pretty much can't see the line up there at all. This is a little bit too thin. Yeah. Okay. We will let them dry and see what they are like. It is the next day, so these are thoroughly dry now, and this is the result. So this is the primary yellow. And then we have the orange. So you can see the differences in opacity. We have the quinacridone rose, the PV19. And this is just dioxazine violet. So you can barely see the black line in comparison to the Quin Rose. You can barely see it at all. Let's try and get these in order of how I did them. So this is ultramarine blue, which is pretty opaque. And we have the Prussian blue, again, pretty opaque. We also have a cat hair. The joys of having cats. And then we have phthalo green. It's not showing up super well on the camera, so I will try to color adjust this. The yellow ochre. I wonder if I put these next to each other, it might adjust the green a little bit better. Well, maybe not. And then we have the more cat hair. We have the russet brown, which loses a lot of its redness as it dries. It's still quite a red brown. Reminds me a bit of a very red leaning burnt umber. Then we have the lamp black, a warm leaning black. And finally, permanent white. Let's line these all up to finish. So I have a nice range of colours. Again, I do want to probably pick up a phthalo blue at some point rather than the Prussian. Okay, we're gonna have to shimmy things down a bit. Shimmy, 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 shimmy. Oh, we'll put trying to make space. There we go. I'll move my hand out the way so there's no shadow. So these are all of the gouache paints that I own. These two are Holbein and then the rest are Winsor & Newton Designers Gouache. And this is what I work with whenever I do gouache paintings. For now, this is the range of colours I have. So thank you for joining along. This is definitely a very long form video today. So I hope that you had fun with whatever you were doing, whether you were drawing, working, whatever it might be. And let me know what you were up to. If you've made it this far, let me know in the comments what you were up to. I will see you next time, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye!